Welcome to the Hope After Narcissistic Abuse podcast. I am your host, Amy Helms. Each week, you will hear from experts across the country and even world speak to you on recovering from narcissistic abuse and even how to manage these relationships. You will also hear some periodic solo episodes on how to manage these relationships and what recovery is like. It is my hope that you will leave each episode with some renewed hope that you can and will beat this. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to another episode of Hope After Narcissistic Abuse. Today's guest is Tracy Brown. Tracy is a trauma-informed nutrition therapist and an eating disorder dietitian and stress recovery coach and nutrition counseling skills teacher. She walks beside people that want to heal their relationship with food and weight and also feel safer and less stressed in their bodies. So, do you want to learn to feel safer in your own skin and also stop blaming your body and food for not belonging? Today, we're going to connect with Tracy Brown, a trauma-informed, non-diet nutrition therapist, and help us get clear about the function of chronic dieting, body image issues, and food struggles, and how to stop to get more agency with food and embodied today. Welcome, Tracy. Thank you for being here.
Oh, Amy, thanks you for having me tonight. And just really looking forward to seeing where this conversation kind of evolves and helping people have some felt sense of something makes sense. Nobody goes on a diet for fun. Nobody binges for fun. We know they're just kind of relief valves for what feels too much or not enough inside. So I'm happy to help hopefully give people some clarity today.
Yeah, well, let's start with that. What do you mean by too much or not enough?
Well, the definition of trauma, I use one of the ones that Peter Levine talks about, which is it's not so much I'm paraphrasing some of his work, but it's not so much the event that is the trauma. It's more about the lack of a compassionate witness afterwards. So the sensations, the feelings, the emotions, how sometimes it feels like our brain kind of like blows apart and then comes back together and it's not quite organized anymore and it's overwhelming and intrusive. And there's just no compassionate witness for things to make sense. Even in the midst of horrific stuff, it helps us so much to heal when things make sense. And when that's missing, we kind of go on to feel like the sensations and the memories and the events are just kind of living on in us as time goes by, but they don't let us go. Right. So the too much is like, the feelings, the emotions, the sensations, sometimes just this inside experience of all that rage and grief and fear that's still floating around that never got titrated off. And then sometimes the not enough is like, there wasn't anybody here. Nobody saw it. Nobody believed it. Talk about some of the narcissism here. Is it like it gets gaslit or minimized or whatever? And that's just the lack of there's something here that witnessed what happened and not alone, so that's kind of my working definition. It doesn't have to be the big T things we talk about, which is car accidents or sexual abuse or even whether it's one time or pervasive or whatever. It can just be these misattunements from the beginning of your life. It could be like, getting bullied and people told you to suck it up, and it's not that bad, or you figured out and whatever it's been. But those are just as damaging as the big things. The relational trauma is sometimes even feels more damaging than the big event kind of things. So, and remember, our bodies are the containers for all that. So the too much inside, this feels too much, this feels overwhelming, then not enough, there's nobody here for me. And I guess it's not that big a deal. You end up learning how to gaslight yourself. And that's the not enough.
Yeah, no, thanks for that explanation. In my work with my patients with eating disorders, I'll ask, well, how do you feel when you binge? What's that like for you? And a lot of times the initial response will be bad, guilty, or shame. Like, no, during the binge, how do you feel? Because a lot of times that feels good. It's numbing. They feel nothing.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's the point.
Right. So that's a lot of times to avoid that too much or not enough, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's like this, there's sections to it. So the whatever's kind of triggered something that feels familiar, that's too much or not enough. So that's like the pre-binge. The during the binge is like the relief valve for that fight, flight, freeze, or please that's happening. And we're just trying to get some space from it in a way that unfortunately has consequences. And then the after effect is like all the programming of what we're supposed to think and feel about it. We're supposed to feel bad about binging, so we do. That's the programming. The middle is, oh, I feel like there's something here for me, or I got to shift my state. And I don't often hear happy from people when they binge. I hear like relief, the absence of feeling anything. So the numbness. Sometimes it feels like that food is filling a hole where there really should be where the not enough is. Like nobody's here, nobody sees me, nobody holds me, no matter whatever. And the beginning is like there's some activation in the system, some fight or flight, freeze or please. It's like you don't always name it before it gets too quickly merged with gotta go get the food or gotta not eat the food or whatever's happening.
No, that's great. So how do you see the not enough or talked about the too much. How does the not enough show up?
Oh my goodness. Well, not enough is so relational. Just even when you hear the phrase this, there's not enough being seen and heard. There's not enough validation of needs. There's not enough. There's something here to hold on to as I do this hard thing.
How would that show up with like eating and body image?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll use an example of, let's say that you're younger, junior, at pre-adolescent, adolescent age, and you get bullied, let's say for your weight. And maybe you feel like there's a couple different not enoughs. There's I told somebody and I was up here activated and like feeling overwhelmed, feeling sad, feeling scared, but I took the risk to tell somebody and they just almost like dropped my vulnerability on the floor. So there's just not enough care, right? And sometimes that would be a reach for something's there. And I literally got my hand slapped. Or I literally got, no, it's not that big a deal. Or the other not enough would be like you reached and there was just nothing there. You reached and then literally just like walked off like you didn't say it. Or what was offered back to you was like, well, sock him in the nose and tell him to quit bullying you. Whatever it was, right? There was just not what was needed available. And so that's going to leave this impression that your needs are too much. You're too much. In the adolescent brain or younger brain, especially because there's no prefrontal cortex really cranking yet, until you're in your early 20s. It's like you're not able to see, like, oh no, they totally gaslight me and that's not cool. You can't think that way when you're 10. You think, oh, I got bullied because of my weight. And now I'm being told that my weight is the problem by default because of lack of care. So I must be bad and wrong. And now you start doing it to yourself and you might figure a way to deal with that, which is constantly tell yourself you're bad and wrong, which you think that's going to motivate you to change your body and change your weight and do disorder eating behaviors. The opposite, I'm just not going to have needs at all. Forget it. It's too dangerous.
Mm-hmm. I think we see sometimes with people that are being hurt at home or being abused, may initially try to ask for help or not be believed. And then it can turn into, well, I'll find some way to communicate my feelings. And it could turn out to be the body.
Oh, it's always, the body's always the container. If it's just not safe, to say that you feel sad, if there's no room for you, no room for your emotions, yeah, the body, it stays in the body. And these are things that just don't get discharged. So there's one thing to go through the event, the bullying. The secondary wound basically is there's nothing here for me. I can't handle this. And you're going to have to create a strategy. That's just adaptive. That's what brains do. They've tried to figure out a way out of some of that pain.
Yeah, and if, for me, and in my experience, it wasn't safe to talk about what was going on at home, but it was safe to take it out of my body and through my body.
Yeah. So, we're speaking what's happening on your plate is happening probably in your life. What you're doing with your body container is another, like where we are communicating what's going on. That's again too much or not enough.
So I know you work with in your groups, in your coaching programs on how to create safe meals, a safe place to eat, safe place for the body. What are some tips you give your clients in your coaching practice?
Sure. Well, the first step is really being able to just give yourself a little bit of space. I'm moving my hands here kind of in this prayer position and out a little bit, just a little bit of space to like unblend from the default, which is when you don't really know how to name your experience inside, you'll do it with food. And being able to use something that it's nothing fancy, just some kind of presence tool to help you go from like, I'm blended with this, I have to restrict, I have to binge, to knowing that you have an option. And sometimes that's as simple as you find your feet on the floor. Can you find all the little pads of your toes on the floor? Because if you're there, you can't be in all this dysregulation. You can't be the same two places at once. So it's either your feet on the floor and this floor's got you and pulling you up. And if you can recognize that as relatively safe enough, now your body, your nervous system has to decide, am I here and the floor is okay and I'm okay? Or am I back there in memory time somewhere or in the future somewhere that I might get criticized for eating or whatever? Your body can inform your brain, hey, it's your feet on the floor. And if that's not too provocative, can you let yourself feel that your bottom is being held up by a seat and you don't have to perform to do that? So I can feel like this chair is meeting me or my bottom's meeting the chair. And what's that like? And then you could do your back, which is, can I feel at the back of this chair? If you have a back on your chair, what's it like for something, or how new is it for something to have your back? And people always say, oh, I never get that. That's really new to actually feel like something has got your back and it's unconditional. This chair doesn't need you to perform, doesn't really care, like what doesn't care what your weight is, doesn't care what you did yesterday. It's like its job is to have your back. And what does that feel like inside? And these just something really simple like that can help you like, oh, okay, now I remember why I'm sitting here with this meal or what my values are and why I would do this hard thing. It just gives you some space to get out of that autopilot of like this food's a threat or the food ending is a threat. You can go both ways. If you feel more triggered by the ending of a meal versus getting started, you can use these tools throughout. Another tool would just be to orient to like the four corners of your wall or something that's out the window, that your favorite tree over here, that's like, I can be in a relationship with tree. I can't really be fully in a relationship with myself, my body. I'm not there yet, but that tree doesn't make me, actually, that tree makes me feel like there's something solid out there in the world, whatever it is, that you can take that experience in, or at least keep it close. That helps you remember, like, oh, yeah, that's right. Like, I got this food in front of me here because I want to basically kind of create this neurobiology inside that here's a competent adult that takes care of my needs. I'm not going to have to do this 1,000 times, but I'm going to need to have something to hold on to maybe to make that feel like not a threat. I need lots of experiences of that. So it also could be holding on to something, a scarf. People can't see this, but this little figurine here, hold on to something like that. Whatever you've got to do to slow things down enough to like, oh yeah, I'm 34 years old and it's 2022 and nobody's making me do this. This isn't forced on me. This is something that I want to be more competent at, for example. But it's hard to think those things until your body feels safe enough that it's not a threat. Even less of a threat's good. That's a good starting place.
I think the key, what you're giving different examples of, is it needs to be individualized.
Oh, totally. Some of these things work none for anybody, and some of them, that's all they ever need. You don't do a bunch more than that.
Right. Because if someone has a bad memory with the tree, then we're not going to use a tree.
That's right. That's right.
Right. I was doing this with someone a while ago, and one of her favorite memories of a child was being in New York and looking at the Starry Night photo. And so we actually printed out the picture and put it at the table. And so she could just stare at it. But we had trouble coming up with much else. So that was enough.
Sometimes that's it.
And that's all we
Yes.
needed.
That's all you needed. Exactly. So if you're somebody that simply think about your senses, so whatever, sight, sound, touch, hearing, texture, whatever, or it can be, again, more proprioceptive. I'm definitely a proprioceptive person. So it's like soft textures and the dog nearby and although we're all different. So pick a sensory, you pick one of your senses and go from there. Like, oh yeah, visual reminders don't do much for me, but if I hear what I need to feel relatively safe enough, I could eat. Or spaciousness wise, it's like if you things proprioceptive feel too far away, maybe I eat my meal in a tent or in a nest. I've done all those things with people too, like literally a pillow fort on the floor, and the meal's getting just great because they need that protection. Their sensory system needs to feel like there's nothing's like basically going to get me. Nobody can criticize me, and I can do it. But if they're too out in the open, that just feels too exposed. So we got to work on that.
And some people need to see the exit
Yeah,
or
that's
see
right.
what's around
Yeah.
them. So again, it's a great example. So you were talking about the beginning versus the end. So how can someone know which part's more difficult for them?
I think there's a really great discussion. They could do some journaling or do it with your provider to be able to, let's work backwards. When did you start to feel the activation around eating, not eating? And you think it's 6 o'clock, but really it's 3 o'clock. So I really try to work backwards in time to track, fight, flight, freeze, or please. And when did they first start having thoughts or feelings or images or whatever of how this evening is going to go, or something else could be triggering that's overcoupled with like eating or not eating. So I back it up, and usually you find it could be 5 minutes before, it could be 3 hours before. So let's say if dinner is your hardest meal and you're already anticipating it being hard at 3 o'clock, we got to work at 3 o'clock. So you might need to be getting in your hammock with your weighted blanket and spending 30 minutes just getting your system back into some regulation, and then really holding on to that before the evening starts. You might need to have a plan for the evening if that's your hardest meal. Or like, we're not going to like be doing lots of spontaneous eating maybe for a while at the evening. It's going to be planned out and regulated well before it even happens. So I really work it back as far as I can to figure out when do the wheels start to fall off.
Used a few terms that I wish every therapist knew and were common practice, but I don't think not everyone does. Would you mind kind of explaining the activation and coupling, overcoupling for people that don't know?
Sure. Yeah. So again, we're not meant to be humans that are always feeling like in flow or feeling like everything's we're present. That's not the point of living. Activation would be, I'm using it in terms of like either hyper activated or hypo activated. And hyper activation just means you're in fight or flight. Your nervous system has taken from some cues from the either outside or inside that like there's a threat. So we get activated. We want to do something about that signal of threat, whether it's real or perceived, whatever. So fight or flight responses. And that can be revved up, buzzy, intrusive thoughts, just having a hard time not moving, whatever's going on. Hypoactivation would be where, again, maybe hyperactivation didn't work, whether it didn't work for 5 minutes or 5 hours, whatever it is for you, whatever your system does. Hypoactivation is like, oh, I got to get out of here. And then you feel fuzzy and you feel kind of foggy and lower energy. You kind of hear some language in your head of like, oh, what's the point? Who cares? I'll never get better. I can't. Hyperactivation would be like, I should, I must, have to, all that stuff. So you can be hypoactivated. And our window of tolerance is where we, again, feel like we can be in some adversity or a challenge, but we feel like we have the resources to deal with it. So it's your stress tolerance, basically. So that's that. That's hypo, and then in your window where it's like, I got to deal with that, but I got some resources to do it. We're going to be okay. That kind of, I'm connected. It's okay. And then overcoupling just means like we've kind of put like one thing kind of gets associated with another. And this one thing's not really inherently a threat, but it feels like a threat because it happened in proximity to something that was really, truly a threat. Like, let's say some kind of abuse in cookies. They don't really go together, but maybe abuse happened with cookies. And now we have this reaction to cookies that's not congruent, but it feels like they go together in your system. I don't know, that's the closest example I could give. And I don't want to be too graphic, but we've worked as clinicians where it's like somebody was given ice cream or something with some kind of abuse to like get
And
somebody to do
pain
something,
can be
right?
overcoupled with some things as well.
Yeah. Or it could be like holidays or overcoupled with food criticism. So you might not be getting food criticized, but you have more activation in your system like it's happening because it's December 24th. Same kind of thing.
Yeah. So like driving the family members, you start getting like nervous.
Yeah, you start getting nervous and you pull right into Walgreens and get down a whole packet of Twizzlers because you're trying to like honestly discharge some of that activation. And you don't want to be eating that, but you find yourself there eating it because this is what I used to do to deal with this. And we're forgetting that maybe we're older now and that we have more resources or skills, but we are really like pulled back into the past of like family, I have no say, I'm going to get nitpicked. And I'm eating to try to like, move some of that activation forgetting that like, oh, I have a voice or I can turn this car around because when you're young you don't have a car and you don't have a credit card and you can't get out. When you're older you can, but you forget it when you get in that activated overcoupled state.
That's a great explanation. So then what are some sensations in the body that people can notice? Okay, hey, this is going on, so I could maybe use a skill.
Absolutely, that's one of the first steps. Yeah, I think you asked about steps earlier is giving yourself some space, but you got to recognize you have a body, you're a human being, you have a nervous system, and it's autonomic. It just does stuff. So it's not your fault. But you can get good at witnessing, oh, I'm feeling really revved up. Oh, I've been stuck on the same article for like 10, I've read the same page 20 minutes, whatever. And that those are all different symptoms of like, I am not in my window here right now. Like I'm not fully present. Could feel so hyperactivation would be like emotionally flooded. From an eating disorder and diet food perspective, some of the really telltale signs are calorie counting, OCD with food, food rules, body trashing, just these really pervasive, aggressive kind of thoughts around yourself or your food or others. That's hyperactivation. And also the feeling sensation. So it'd be like revved up, jumpy, antsy, twirly. You can, again, I use a lot of sensation and feeling charts with my clients to like, what is this? And it's a felt sense of like, yeah, I feel like I want to run or I want to fight. Well, flight or fight, right? So,
I hear bloated too, which like they feel like I've eaten but not
well, bloated
sometimes.
is different. Bloated's a little bit more, again, the felt sense in a lot of people would be things aren't moving. And so you'd have to look at all the body as a whole. Like, are you feeling this isn't moving and you're revved up in your chest? Or it's like, man, I'm bloated and I can't even feel that I have a body from my neck down. That's more dissociative. That would be the more the dorsal. And bloated, we know how it is with food. It's like, well, are you bloated because gastric motility is slow because of under eating? Or are we bloated because literally you're in such a threat response that the priority isn't digestion? It totally is like either climbing a tree to get to safety, fighting something with a club or your bare hands, or do you have to go away? Does your body literally need to slow down all its processes, slow down the oxygen to like digestive organs and blood flow and all that so you can like reserve your energy? So if you do survive the threat, you can get up and run away. That's what it's for. So, and dorsal is going to feel again foggy, heavy. What's the point? Digestion's kind of just off, like things aren't moving or working like they typically do. No interest, no appetite, like oh, headaches, and you're like, why do I have a headache? Oh, I haven't eaten for 10 hours. Well, that's messed up. What happened? You lost track of time, your needs, your body, whatever. Or eating to feel something. If you have really low kind of insula part of your brain activity where it's like you don't think or feel much, you're eating just to feel something. That's dorsal too.
So basically more paying attention to those sensations and what our bodies feel, which is something kind of opposite to what we've been taught most of our lives.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and especially if you've been in, these emotionally or relational or physically abusive situations, or just in diet culture in general, that's always telling you that you can't trust yourself. You don't know how you feel. Clearly, you're out of control. Because look at you, those kind of things, you start to disembody. So when you're disembodied, you lose the language. Stuff is still happening, but you're just not aware because it, again, doesn't feel safe to be inside. If your needs don't get met, if your emotions feel big and there's nothing there to help you navigate that, of course you're going to check out. It's really protective. And if there's nothing else to help you.
So tell me about the courses you offer and what people can learn from them.
Okay, well, so most of our work, me and my team, is still one-on-one counseling, but we do have a peaceful eating community. And it's very much, we kind of do a mix of like the didactic with food and lots of group coaching and body image work, but also a lot of nervous system health regulation work, a lot. So usually the sessions kind of start and end with arriving, noticing what your state is, how that's impacting your food, what they want to, how they want to provide against more safety, having that co-regulatory experience with me or the dietitians or the group members, and then closing the space, doing a lot of that. And we really work hard on the function, like what is the function of this? Because we're not interested in performative recovery. Great, you can stop binging, gain weight, whatever you need to do. But the next big stressor you have, if the wheels fall off again, because you don't have enough relational safety with yourself and others in the world, it's like you're just going to relapse. So we work really hard on like, don't tell me, it's not just about like, oh, I didn't binge this week, or like I ate more for breakfast. That's awesome. What allowed enough safety to do that?
Yes.
And let's do that 10,000 more times. And so that it's real in your system, not just like, oh, I'm doing the recovery thing. Totally not interested in performative recovery. We really focus on, you've got to have a neurobiology that supports that, otherwise it won't stick.
And that's one of my things about like centers and treatment places is they don't get to the function. Like no, everything's a function. It's like, well, what about it? Or let's get to the why.
Yeah, if we don't get to the root, it's the root's there, right? You can cut off the
Yeah,
top
it's
but
gonna grow
then
back.
20 years later, it's gonna come back. It's gonna come back, right? So that's more for more non-professionals. And then we actually have two courses for professionals. One's more like a counseling skills, body image decoding thing for dietitians and coaches. And then we have a trauma course. Really, I'm teaching a lot of stuff to teach dietitians how to do it in their scope, but we do a lot of parts work and SE that's like, not like SE light kind of stuff. And then, yeah, just learning how to be a regulated human in the space. So our clients have something to kind of, I call it draft off of. They learn how to be in co-regulatory relationship. And then that builds I think, a runway for people to land their food, land. It's this time of year and everybody's super triggered to like, and programmed to want to go to a diet. Well, we want you to get to the place where it's like January comes and goes. You didn't think much of it. It's just another month. And you're just doing your thing with your food and your care and your people and your life. And you're not like, oh, yeah, I remember those bad days. Ugh, I'm glad I'm not there anymore. You don't feel like, oh, I'm missing out or I got to do it too. It's just, that's sad.
And then your one-on-one work.
Oh my goodness. You know how it is. It's very individual. We really just work on, again, relationship with food, the pragmatic of food, helping people eat from hunger and fullness without it being another hunger fullness diet thing. But we just do so much in the session. What is that like inside? So you wrote down your food, and what is it like inside not to get judged, for example? Because everybody, no matter how much you tell them, like I'm not that kind of dietitian, I'm not that kind of human. I actually don't really care what you're eating. I want you to be the expert on your food and your body and that experience. And you can tell somebody that, but until they have 1,000 experiences of like, it really, you help them build a neural pathway that's like, that's true. Not everybody's my family, not everybody's my fat shaming doctor, not everybody. They start to be able to feel that in your system and be more able to tell in the world when there's other people like that too. Because how often when we've had all this abuse and body and food gaslighting, all this kind of stuff, we kind of tend to keep replaying being in relationships with people who would do that to us again, because that's the only neural pathway we have. I'm trying to help them install and have a different experience of like, yeah, not everybody's like that. Not everybody cares about that. Not everybody needs you to be a certain way for you to be in a relationship with them. They just care about you. And if we don't have any installation of a neural pathway that we've experienced that, we don't see it, we don't know it, and we don't feel it when it's there, when we're present with it.
I think that's a key thing to remember. Yeah, is that as you're creating new neural pathways, it'll feel different and weird at first. But then once you've developed it, it will feel normal and right.
Yeah. Yeah. But it takes, and that's what, when you hear the words regulation and co-regulation, that's all that means is like you learn how to have resonance with something that it's already in your system. But if you don't have, like sometimes people are like, oh, I'll just a silly little example. It's like, take the drive off your wall. Let's look at your wiring. Oh, You don't have wiring to experience joy with eating. All you have is eating means some bad's going to happen. So that's why when you go to eat your food, you feel all depressed because you're eating more food, but there's no wiring of joy connected to that. So we can install that. And so let's practice together. What was that like that you liked that? What was that like inside to well, I still feel like should feel judged and guilt, but honestly, it tastes really good. And what is it like for something to taste good and nothing bad happened? So, yeah, I'm really digging to the people's experiences of something new. So you don't want to diet again because you remember actually that's painful. It's just that's all you've ever known.
Right. So that's an example of uncoupling.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I love asking people, well, what's hunger? And then talking about a baby as an example and asking them, well, what does a baby do when it's hungry? And they think, oh, they scream. Well, what about before that? And then they, a blank face. And I'm like, well, what about when they turn to the mom? And then, it's like the headlights. I'm like, well, then after that, like they'll smack their lips. And then after that, maybe like a fist. And then if you ignore it, then they'll scream. I'm like, so that's the stomach growls, the scream. And then, it's like this awakening moment. I'm like, you're waiting for the baby to scream to eat. And then, so it's even just those experiences. Yeah.
And that's what dieting teaches. Like you don't eat until it's like so far and you don't get satisfied. I call it dieting fullness. It's not really like I'm good and satisfied. I feel a little pressure or whatever. It's okay, I had some food now and like the hunger's gone, so I'm done. It's like that's not the same experience. It's like, oh, I'm done. That's like, okay, well, I took my meager portion now. I'm a good girl. I'm done. That's and then you're hungry in 2 hours and you're mad at yourself. That's not fullness or satisfaction. That's just absence of hunger. So it's same on both ends. People wait too long and they overestimate fullness, or they go way far full because they don't know where the subtle stuff is, but that's part of being disembodied. That's what diet culture does to you. It makes you a stranger to your own body. You don't know the language of your cues. That's what it's supposed to do. That's the point. Because dieting doesn't care about your satisfaction. Yeah, your agency is just the means, just the end justifies the means and vice versa. It's like it doesn't matter how you feel. You got thinner and then now people love you and that's just the programming until you get thinner and then not everybody still loves you all the time and the compliments are gone and now you're like, now what? It's the fantasy of being thinner versus the reality. So
And not always happier.
I think something really important is that when you don't know the language of your body's cues, we tend to see them all as uncomfortable. And there's a difference between not uncomfortable, but like as a threat. There's a difference between a threat inside and being uncomfortable. And most everybody I work with has to work with some level of figuring out like, oh, that sensation is maybe awakening some kind of emotion. I've stuck down there for 20 years. But that amount of food I'm hearing from a kid isn't that making you sick? It's not making a reflux. You're not having diarrhea. You're not super full. So there's a difference though between all of that, which is not happening, and food in your body and something else that's arising. We have to learn how to differentiate all that. And that's some of the hardest work that I think that, people don't really talk about enough is differentiation of body sensations and signals. And when you don't know, that can even trigger like, I don't know what this is, so it must be bad. Let's talk about the qualities of what this is. So is it true that it's bad and a threat, or is it just new, or like you said, different? So
And sometimes it's okay to just sit and pause and let's figure out what this is.
and sometimes part of the training is like that quietness or that absence of like running away. That's where we have to be careful not to dissociate because you know sitting still too long could be a threat for some people, and that's why it's so hard to be embodied, and it takes time to like that's why we have these tools to help us with. I can hold on to something as I try to be present, but I can't stay present too long without dissociating. So knowing where your edges are and growing that as well.
Great advice. Thank you. And thank you for being with us. So where can people find you online?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So tracybrownrd.com, pretty simple. Got a website, do sometimes new blogs, sometimes just video review blogs. I do a lot of teaching. If you're on Facebook, I do live videos usually twice a week. I've been doing that for 6, 7+ years now, a long time. I just love doing it and just all these kind of topics I talk about. yeah, so you can find me there for that. And there's lots of free gifts on the website as well. If you're a practitioner listening to this, I have a website called Embodied Dietitian, and same kind of stuff. Some free tools, listings about training, that kind of stuff too.
Well, thank you. And those will all be linked in the show notes as well. Thank you again, and please tune in to the next show. Thank you again for tuning in to our podcast, Hope After Narcissistic Abuse. We hope you were able to leave with some renewed hope. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe to the channel, give us a review, head to the show notes for more information on the things that we highlighted. And there's also a link to the website for a course that we offer on the same topic, Hope After Narcissistic Abuse. Thank you again, and please tune in to the next episode.